So let's just say I was a member of the shadowy elite and I had pledged an allegiance to the dark side, and I knew that the day of reckoning was nigh. I'm talking real nigh, like January 22nd when the Epstein client list gets unveiled nigh. I would probably start a war. If there ever was a great time to start a war, to take attention away so you never had to face any accountability. And of course, we know that they're not going to withstand the rigors of a jail cell. They will go down kicking and screaming, even if it means the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. Well, it's very possible at this point in time that if you were a string puller, okay, if you were among the movers and shakers in the world, you would use that power and influence now more than ever before to try to trigger a massive conflict because you knew the day of judgment was nigh. And we have until January 22nd, I do think, until they create some kind of massive distraction to completely overshadow this story and the unveiling of this list of unnamed, blacked out names, John Does, who were not identified in the reams of documentation that were released onto the internet today that has the internet very well entertained. Especially Alan Dershowitz, who is doing incredible damage control and getting ratioed to high heaven. You remember the guy who debated Norman Finkelstein on the issue of Israel and the Gaza Strip? Well, if you haven't seen the debate, go and watch it. But sure enough, my boy Norman Finkelstein has been fully vindicated. And Alan Dershowitz, man, I would hate to be that guy right now. That's why it's great to be a Jedi. It's great to be a good guy at times like these because the payoff isn't always immediate. But that dark side, man, sooner or later, as Johnny Cash would say, that force in the universe is going to cut you down. Now, we got Germany evacuating their citizens from Lebanon. We have one of the biggest attacks in Iran's history, okay? Biggest terrorist attacks, killing 103 people, hundreds of casualties. They're chanting death to America in Iran right now. It feels like just yesterday I was saying that nothing is ever going to happen. I was having passing thoughts of that, but yet tomorrow would come and I'm sure, some event would happen and here we go. Now, you have to ask yourself, because of course, from the Iranian perspective, even if this was chalked up as ISIS related, of course, from their perspective, they believe that ISIS was a creation or in some way funded by Western intelligence agencies, including the Mossad. Now, I'm not going to speculate much on that, but what we do know is that they're blaming the Americans and the Israelis for this attack. So the question is, let's just entertain them for a second. If that is true, that is the case, would we be trying to provoke some sort of response to justify our going to war with a country? Because you see, in the current climate, we've basically used up all our karma from October 7th, okay? The Israelis, they blew their load way too quick. I mean, I don't know why there wasn't somebody there saying, hey, this is an opportunity. Okay, look, you have now a blank check to pretty much do whatever you want. Use it wisely. Don't spend it all in one place. Don't just go indiscriminately bombing a place because you can, because there will be repercussions. Okay, the people of the world eventually will push back, which is what they did in the largest protests ever before seen, probably in humankind's history, across the world. So they burned that credit card. They wrote checks and now they're bankrupt in terms of public sympathy. So how do they get that back? How can they justify going to war with Hezbollah? Well, they have to be doing these things in order to provoke a massive response. Unfortunately for them, if this is the case, again, this is all hypothetical, right? Please don't cancel me, YouTube. Not yet. We're not quite at that World War III apex yet. So I gotta stay on deck as long as possible. Now, if I was them, I would be trying to poke the bears. Okay, and what they're trying to do right now, it seems, is provoke a response from the Iranians, from not so much the Houthis, but because the Houthis don't need any provocation, but nobody seems to care. Well, actually they do, and they've given their final ultimatum, that USA-led coalition. But you have to do something major, yet Nasrallah and all of the leaders of these various groups are not taking the bait. And so they're left in this situation where, what do we do? You know, and the ultimate, the last ditch Hail Mary that you can do under these circumstances, and I'm not saying this is the case, I'm just saying that this is something that I would do if I was very evil and I could pull a lot of strings and maybe my name was on that list. I would say, well, can't we just create something? Can't we just create a problem? Can't we just create a crisis? Like a big crisis? Like, hey, how about we, okay, we got these nuclear power plants. How about we pretend like the nuclear power plants were being attacked by a guy, and then we had no other choice because it was a radiological incident and we had to respond. Nuclear materials, right? You know, it could just be a small amount, but as long as we get nuclear materials in the title of that headline, I think that might give us the license that we need to take action. Now, again, it could be a warship. These false flags could present themselves in a myriad ways. Cyber attack is a great one. We could just, you know, black out our power grid. We could infect our own systems with a virus that we had the antidote to, and that we'll just, you know, pretend like we're going to fix in order to make it look like we didn't do it. There's a variety of things that one would do if they knew that the other side was not taking the bait, because clearly they're not. I mean, you're talking about a brigadier general that was assassinated. You're talking about the second in the Hamas chain of command that was assassinated on Lebanese soil. And today, you have more high-profile individuals, not from Hamas that were assassinated on Lebanese soil, but from Hezbollah. And yet, no response. The only response we're hearing is to the Houthis, who were issued a final ultimatum today. And let me see if I have that here somewhere. But effectively, it was just a lot of political legalese. And it was a joint statement from the governments of the United States, Australia, Bahrain, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Germany, Italy, basically everybody plus the Five Eyes and Japan, right? So recognizing the broad consensus as expressed by 44 countries around the world, what about the other 150? I guess they don't count. On December 19th, as well as the statement by the UN Security Council on December 1st, condemning Houthi attacks against commercial vessels transiting the Red Sea. And basically it goes on and on and on, and it eventually says that we call for the immediate end of these illegal attacks and release of unlawfully detained vessels and crews. The Houthis will bear the responsibility of the consequences should they continue to threaten lives. The global economy and free flow of commerce in the region's critical waterways will remain committed to an international rules-based order against malign actors and blah, blah, blah. It all sounds great, right? It all sounds great, but ultimately what they mean is that we're going to go to war, and we're getting all our ships in position for that fateful day, because we know that on that day, the price of oil goes through the roof, because we know what the Houthis can do in the region, not necessarily to U.S. warships, but to surrounding military bases within the region, as well as their allies' critical infrastructure, which of course will rapidly and drastically increase the price of energy around the world. The last thing the United States needs when it's trying to get inflation under control. So this is bad. And this is why, if I was one of those evil guys who had made a pact with the devil, made a Faustian bargain, and decided to take a trip to that island and have sexual relations with underage girls and probably boys, then I think I would try to do whatever I could to get myself out of that predicament by starting a war, at least taking attention away. Because in the very least, they know their time is going to be up. They know they'll get thrown to the wolves eventually, just like Madoff and the other NFT guy, or not the NFT guy, the crypto guy that just went down. Just like Epstein himself. These guys have no loyalty to each other, but they do have a lot of clout. They do have a lot of political power that they can wield. And we're talking about the billionaire class here, the movers and shakers of the world. Many of them, I'm sure, are are a part of the neocon agenda. I would not be surprised if Lindsey Graham's name wasn't on this list. I mean, I would be very surprised if it wasn't. Again, we should also caveat all of this by saying, just because a person had an association with Epstein doesn't necessarily mean they partook in these misdeeds. At the same time, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're good just because they didn't know Epstein, because there are thousands of traffickers around the world. And we can only imagine what sort of dark forces a person has to play with at that level in order to just have the inhumanity to watch what we're seeing in the world unfold for millions of people, the suffering that's being inflicted because of the injustice. In order to be in a position where you can change that, and you don't, you either have to be a serious coward or you would have to sell your soul to the dark side, I do believe. And it's a great day to be a Jedi. It's a great day to be a good guy and be vindicated. I would hate to be Alan Dershowitz today. If you didn't see the debate between Alan Dershowitz and my man Norman Finkelstein, maybe we'll try to get Norman on the channel. Norman Finkelstein is a descendant of Holocaust survivors, okay? And this guy is an advocate for Palestinian rights. And probably, one of the most cogent and level-headed, even-keeled, and just, it has the best perspective on the Palestine issue. As a person who knows, or at least whose family has experienced what he's experienced, he's in a very unique situation to talk about this, and he gets in a debate with Alan Dershowitz and completely hands Dershowitz's ass, okay? So Dershowitz is now doing damage control like you would not believe on Twitter, getting ratioed to hell, and it's very well earned, in my personal opinion. Because the stuff that he was caught up in, well, if that was my daughter, I'm not going to say what I would do because, especially with trafficking, because these girls are taken against their will in a lot of cases, and that's the real tragic part. Anyways, what else do we have to talk about today? Our friend Douglas McGregor has told Judge Napolitano that the plan is to put missiles, U.S. missiles in Finland. Now, I've been saying this for weeks, and that's why you guys come to me for the daily updates, because I got nothing better to do with my time but sit there and wait for the news to come out. And basically, I told you that the plan was for the U.S. to effectively commandeer Finland's military bases. Not an entire violation of sovereignty, but they're going to be calling the shots ultimately when the war with Russia starts. And they're going to either put in position anti-ballistic missiles or possible nuclear missiles in Finland, which is going to put a massive target on Finland's back. Fortunately, the Finns have 50,000 fallout shelters and nuclear bunkers, and they're a very prepared nation. It would be no easy task, if not impossible, for the Russians to invade and occupy that place unless they first level it with nukes and then go in there afterwards and then fight, an urban war with whoever the survivors were who came to the surface. It sounds very ugly, but this is what Douglas Colonel McGregor is suggesting. He's saying that they are idiots. And that just got to check my 6 here, because the more risque the content gets, the more I'm looking over my shoulder nowadays. And I got cameras everywhere, okay? Surveillance is a massive force multiplier. Anyways, the United States may place missiles in Finland and provoke Russia into responding, says the former Pentagon chief advisor, Colonel Douglas McGregor. And I could have told you this a long time ago. I mean, obviously, this is going to get a major negative response from the Russians. It already is, okay? And the Russians right now are incredibly concerned about these F-16s. Even though they might try to play it down, I dabble in some of the pro-Russian websites, believe it or not. And there's a reason why, because our side lies to us all the time. I mean, like, I'm going to go back to this F-16s issue, but just get a load of this. The Ukrainians who released footage of the recent attack, 4 residents of Kiev faced 12 years in prison for publishing a video of the consequences of a massive missile attack on the capital of Ukraine on January 2nd. Now, I guarantee, actually I shouldn't guarantee, but I'm very confident that it was not the footage of the civilian buildings, because that would have all been put out by the SBU, okay, because they want to show that. It was likely the footage that I shared on my social media accounts that showed an actual successful attack, a massive mushroom cloud of an explosion in Kiev that we're not supposed to talk about, right? Because we got to pretend like they intercepted all the missiles. Everything is just fine. Is this democracy? I mean, I understand that when you're at war, there's a certain measure of control, level of control that needs to be imposed, right? You need a martial law, and you need to have a certain degree of dictatorship. But 12 years in prison for just sharing the reality of the situation? I mean, think about it. If this was Germany in the 1945, and you had a person who was trying to wake the German people up to, like, hey, we're losing, you know, we got to throw in the towel here, we don't want to start a war anymore, and it was made illegal. And I'm not trying to, maybe it's false equivalence, I'm not drawing a parallel in terms of ideology. I'm just saying in wartime, it's imperative that those dissident voices still have a voice, right? Because otherwise you're putting yourself in a situation where you're liable to be exploited and sent off into a war that is futile, that you cannot win. Anyways, I just thought that that was completely insane. This is the world we're living in. And these are the people who are taking trips to islands. And it looks like I got 4% on my battery. Some guy's like, hey man, why don't you get yourself a better camera with all that YouTube money you make? Well, I think there's a certain part about, I like living on the edge. And sometimes that motivates me to get through this stuff faster, so I'm not just rambling on. Anyways, according to Breton Gordon, British Army Colonel Hamish de Breton Gordon, NATO may send troops into Ukraine if the Ukrainian armed forces face even greater problems at the front. They're saying it. Okay, now the F-16s, the Russians are saying, look, these F-16s, they're not going to be, you know, we're not too worried about them from an existential point of view. However, it is necessary to take measures for the timely detection and destruction of F-16 fighters, both in the air and at home airfields. They're actually playing the devil's advocate and saying, okay, maybe the F-16s aren't there yet, but when they do finally arrive, they could inflict some major damage on the Russians. And they are concerned about that, and that, of course, would take us to the brink of nuclear Armageddon. Guys, stay prepped, stay ready. I got to go. We got 2% on the clock, and I think that this might be my last video. Yeah. Like I said, you know, they're jumping ship on Lebanon. And this whole repositioning of the Gerald R. Ford carrier, I almost suspect that's a bit of a feint maneuver. You got Blinken going there, and the whole activation of the Civil Air Reserve Fleet, I suspect a war is coming. Everybody thinks a war is coming, and what a great time to do it when you know a lot of rich people are about to go down. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. If I'm still here after I post this, thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.